Hey friends, happy Wednesday. Hi everyone. We're hopping on this Instagram live to talk about the hearing that took place on Capitol Hill today about PBS and NPR. Robert Draper is a reporter for the New York Times, and he was in the room where it was happening. I'm going to give you all a chance to join. We're talking about what happened at the PBS/NPR, or Corporation for Public Broadcasting, NPR, hearing today. It was organized by Marjorie Taylor Greene, and it was dubbed by her with this title, quote, Anti-American Airwaves, Holding the Heads of NPR and PBS Accountable. And Robert Draper has been covering this for the New York Times, and he frequently writes profiles of significant figures in American politics and government. He also covers political dynamics on the right wing and what is happening. I hope these are helpful, you guys. I thought that I missed the hearing, and Robert, as I said, was inside the hearing. And so I wanted to see if he could talk to us about what he witnessed and the tone of the hearing and what it might mean for PBS and NPR. Robert, it worked. I can't
Hey
believe
there.
it. How are
Yes,
you?
I know. I'm doing very well, Katie. Thanks for having me on.
Thank you so much for being here, Robert. I'm just going to turn off commenting so we can see you. You look so
Sure.
blurry, though.
Yes, I know. Sorry about that. I apologize for the barrenness of my. I'm in. We've all of our conference rooms are busy today because everybody's doing interviews at the Times, and so I am using the not yet occupied office room of columnist David Brooks.
Oh,
He
well, tell David to please thank David for letting us use his
I'll thank David,
office.
and I will advise him to send an interior decorator over here post haste.
Listen, thanks for hopping on this. I think a lot of
Sure.
people may not have seen this hearing, but I thought it had a chilling title: Anti-American Airwaves, Holding the Heads of NPR and PBS Accountable. In her opening remarks, Marjorie Taylor Greene derided PBS and NPR's quote unquote radical left wing echo chambers that publish skewed news reports and indoctrinated children with LGBTQ programming. So can you basically walk us through what happened at this hearing today and the crux of Marjorie Taylor Greene's remarks?
Sure. And I'll start, Katie, by saying what you already know, which is that as long as you and I have been journalists, we have been hearing this kind of charge from people on the right side of the dial who have accused public radio and really all of public media of being of harboring a liberal bias and therefore opposing any federal funding for them. So in that sense, this hearing wasn't altogether new, except for the wrinkles that were being provided by Chairwoman Greene and others on the Republican Party who are members of the subcommittee. This is the so-called DOGE subcommittee that's set up to address wasteful spending, very much in concert with what Elon Musk is doing. And this is their third hearing, but it's the first one in which they have brought witnesses who essentially were not there just to offer testimony, but basically to make their own case for why they deserve federal funding. So we had the CEOs of both NPR and PBS there doing exactly that, and Chairwoman Greene set the stage with a pretty incendiary opening statement in which she accused them of putting drag queens on the air, of saying and doing inappropriate things during children viewing hours, and of blurring gender distinctions, that sort of thing. This has become fairly standard fare from people on the right, but it was the first time that I'm aware of where where CEOs of a media organization accused of broadcasting such things have had to speak to those charges.
Well, let's talk about how they responded. Paula Kerger and Catherine Marr. Paula Kerger is the head of the Corporation for Public Broadcasting. Catherine Marr is the head of NPR. Tell me how they responded to some of these accusations and how they held up in this pretty hostile environment.
Yeah, essentially what they did was circumnavigate, that is, not respond directly to a lot of the allegations. In their opening statements, they basically said what we've heard executives from public media corporations say before, which is that their programming is essential, that it is viewed and heard by people often in remote areas who don't have access to any other kind of news information, and that they provide a great deal of bang for the buck that the federal government is paying for them. Now, when they were required to, the CEO, Ms. Kruger of PBS, said that nothing relating to drag queens was actually put on the air. There was something inadvertently put on a New York website that was then taken down, but it was never publicly aired. Ms. Maher, the CEO of NPR, actually had to account less for what NPR has broadcast and more for what she herself has said in tweets that she put out in 2018 and 2020, well before she took this job. Those were tweets that criticized President Trump, calling him variously a sociopath and a racist. And so in tandem with the general view that NPR, the general view is expressed by the Republican members that NPR has a liberal bias, this pursuing what she herself had written personally before taking the job was an avenue for them basically to say, clearly, you're not the person to make NPR out to be the kind of nonpartisan organization that it's supposed to be.
Having said that, Robert, Catherine Maher did admit that her network, NPR, mishandled the Hunter Biden laptop story and expressed regret. For those aforementioned tweets, she expressed regret. But what about this Hunter Biden laptop story? How important was that exchange? And how would you assess her justification for not covering that more aggressively?
Well, she did it. Her justification basically was a non-justification. What she said was that that took place before she was CEO, that she disagreed with the assessment on the part of the news director back then for NPR that it wasn't a newsworthy story. She felt like it should have been covered vigorously, and she said that she aimed to be sure that safeguards were put in place, that that sort of thing, should there be a sort of thing like that in the future, would receive coverage. Now, one of the Republican members, Brian Jack from Georgia, seemed to suggest that perhaps the failure to coverage that, given the wide reach of NPR, could have swung the 2020 election to Joe Biden, and offered her an opportunity to at least admit that possibility. She didn't take the bait and said that that was not something that she could quantitatively speak to.
I'm curious, what is the goal here? And can you explain how much government funding goes to both the PBS and NPR? Because I was surprised, Robert, it wasn't as significant as I thought.
No, it's not. And I can't recall offhand, Katie, what it was for PBS, but what's cited for NPR is that it's less than 5% of their overall budget, which presented kind of a conundrum for Catherine Maher when she was then asked, well, given that such a small amount, does NPR really need it? Do taxpayers really have to be on the hook for paying? And she said, absolutely, it's essential that that 5% goes to support the satellites for some of the more rural networks that don't have private donations in the way that, say, some of the big cities do. So yeah, it's actually not that much at all in the scheme of things, but it is, at least as Catherine Maher explained it, the portion of the budget that's least likely to be buttressed by private donations.
Got it. And what else could ostensibly the Marjorie Taylor Greene and her committee do to hurt either NPR or PBS? How could she potentially make life more difficult or damage the institutions that, by the way, according to the Pew Research Center, a survey this month showed that 43% of adults believed NPR and PBS should continue to receive federal funding. 24% said Congress should remove those funds, and 33% said they were not sure. And NPR has 43 million listeners from every state in the nation, and added that 60% of all Americans trust public broadcasting.
Yeah, I mean, that's now, I think that number 60% probably marks a decline from where it had been, say, 10 years earlier. But it remains the case, Katie, that public media has enjoyed a lot of support across the ideological spectrum. I remember attending a 2011 town hall hosted by then freshman Congressman Sean Duffy of Wisconsin. He is now the Secretary of Transportation in the Trump administration. And Duffy's Tea Party compatriots were eager, just like this group of Republicans, to slash away at the federal budget. And rumors were already afoot back then that NPR was going to be a target, which meant, among other things, Wisconsin Public Radio. And this had Duffy's constituents up in arms. He was not prepared for the gale force of protests on the part of the attendees. And by the end of it, he said, okay, don't worry, I'm going to protect funding. And so, what Chairwoman Greene, who also has a number of rural constituents, and the other Republicans are trying to say is, look, we're $36 trillion in debt as a nation. We need to be supporting Elon Musk's effort to cut waste in the federal budget. And look, do we really need to be paying money for these public media organizations that oftentimes will broadcast things that some people find objectionable? It was notable, Katie, that the chairman of the overall oversight committee, Jamie Comer, happened to attend, and Comer, in a way to sort of preempt the argument that rural folks, including his own, depend on public broadcasting, so that as a boy growing up in rural Kentucky, he used to listen to it all the time, to Kentucky Public Radio. That was his sole source of news, but he listens to it now, insists that it's a totally different beast, unrecognizable, and in fact is propaganda.
Well, could it be unrecognizable because it's covering Donald Trump? And is there any media outlet that Marjorie Taylor Greene approves of other than Fox News, Newsmax, and right-wing media outlets?
Yeah, don't forget Real America's Voice, whose broadcaster Brian Glenn is her boyfriend.
Oh, right,
So
right,
yeah,
right.
yeah. So in all likelihood, Chairwoman Greene approves of those. She obviously is focusing on things relating to transgender, and back in 2021, when she was a freshman, she got into a fight with a Democratic member of Congress who had a transgender child, and Congresswoman Greene posted outside her office, and she may well have it outside her office to this day, something saying there are two genders. So this has been a pet issue of hers, and something that she's been able to fundraise off of.
But is it just transgender issues, or there are bigger issues? Obviously, it's not just that they were attacking PBS and NPR about, right?
No, it's, well, I mean, she, in her opening statement, she was suggesting that PBS and NPR had said things that were socialist, perhaps even downright communist, that they weren't patriotic, that they were mercilessly attacking a duly elected president. So no, it's you're correct to say that her critique has been far more encompassing than just that of gender-related issues.
So where does the issue go from here, Robert? Are there going to be more hearings? Will they take steps against PBS and NPR in terms of funding? And is there concern that this is going to metastasize to other news organizations in terms of taking stands against other legacy media operations?
Well, I think that parallel to these efforts are ongoing efforts by the Trump administration and some of their allies in conservative media to attack, to denigrate in a number of ways what the mainstream media is up to. They've suggested that the number of media organizations are somehow funded by the federal government, for example, our subscription base, or something that the New York Times, for example, has thousands of subscribers that are paid for through the federal agencies. So those that that kind of vitriol is kind of par for the course and something we can expect to continue. As for what will take place with NPR and PBS and other public media groups, yeah, sure. I think that we're likely to see this introduced into future continuing resolutions and budget agreements. This has gone on often, throughout the years, including way back when during the Tea Party days of 2011. And traditionally, there has been there have been moderate Republicans or people on the Senate side who have stripped out that those provisions. We'll see if that happens this time. I mean, even as there continues to be support, particularly in remote communities, for public media. There's also been a significant decline, as we heard in the hearing today, in NPR's overall listenership. I think that it went down from something like 60 million to 40 million or something like that, and then has bounced back up to 43 million, but still very significant in terms of its decline figures. And so that may well buoy the spirits of Republicans who think that that they've got momentum on their side to go after these organizations.
But you're right, from the AP to the things they've said about Jeff Goldberg, the editor of the Atlantic, who's been in the headlines all week because of being included in the Signal chat about uh, bombing Yemen, to Donald Trump himself saying some of the things reporters say should be, or report on or characterize, should be illegal. There is really a huge assault on the free press going on within the Trump administration. And this is really just the latest salvo.
Sure. Yeah. And by the way, that figured into what a lot of the Democratic members in today's hearing were saying. They were saying, look, it's kind of amazing that, and yet unsurprising, that we're hearing what we're hearing in terms of these attacks on public media organizations, given that it seems to be of a piece with attacks that conservatives and allies of President Trump have been making on Jeffrey Goldberg, the editor-in-chief of the Atlantic, for example. And yeah, I can tell you that at the Times, we're concerned and attentive to these attacks, but it's in no way affected how we go about our business. But yes, it's concerning that, for example, the Associated Press, because they refused to refer to the Gulf of Mexico by the new moniker, the Gulf of America, that they've been booted out of press briefings and other White House media events. And it seems that, the message is meant to send a kind of chilling effect throughout the media that if you don't accept the monikers that we place and the parameters that we set, then you're going to pay a price for it.
Presidents, and at least as long as I've been in the business, Robert, have tolerated the media and not necessarily enjoyed many things that have been written by them. But the Trump administration seems particularly thin-skinned, to say the least, when people cover news and report things that they don't like, or truth that they try to, basically deflect or deny.
Right, and there are ironies afoot with that, Katie, because as you know, President Trump himself has long been a creature of the media, really, enjoyed a kind of exponential leap in his national standing as a result of being a reality TV show figure, has even to this day interacted more with the national news media than certain Democratic presidents have, including the most recent one, Joe Biden, certainly. And so that reality sits weirdly side by side with all of these attacks that he and his surrogates have made. It's Trump who coined the term fake news, or at least popularized it, and famously said to Leslie Stahl that he attacked the fake news press because it would mean that that they wouldn't be believed if they issued a story that was otherwise discomfiting about Donald
Yeah.
Trump.
Well, fake news was a very effective earworm for many years, and now it seems to have been replaced by the term
Yeah.
hoax, and as a way to discredit unflattering and embarrassing and perhaps illegal activities by the Trump administration. Hey, Robert, thanks so much for hopping on and giving us some insight about what happened. And I guess it's to be continued, but this particular hearing, it's over and done with now, and there's not going to be any follow-ups.
No, it seems unlikely there'll be a follow-up. There will be further subcommittee hearings by this Doge subcommittee, but I doubt when it relates to public media. I think that they had their moment in the sun, as it were, and Chairwoman Greene will set her sights on some new target.
All right, Robert Draper, the New York Times, as always, thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate it.
Absolutely. My pleasure, Katie.
Okay, see you all later. Bye.
Bye-bye.